So we have a very proactive and a leader who has a vision for the institution, which is
मैम संधू मैम लाइव कर दिया है, आप चाहे शुरू कर सकते
okay. So it's a good experience to work with people who want the institution to go forward. You've seen a lot of what happens when that's not there, right? So she joined took over as a principal of the college 2 years ago, and it's been an upward swing since then.
That's good stuff.
Thank you. It's the entire team is working very hard.
Okay, you can go on your wall. You can jack up your volume, Cindy, to compensate for the voice issue. So go
loud as it can go.
Okay, is that the loudest you can go?
I believe so. Hold on 1 second.
Go the loudest you can, right? So that people can hear you.
It's the loudest.
Okay.
Unless I use my earphones.
I don't know. You could try that. You could jack up the volume so that everybody can hear you. Okay, आवाज आ रही है क्या सबको सही से?
मैम ठीक है, जब वो बोलना शुरू करेंगे आ जाएगी।
आ जाएगी ना?
हाँ।
तुमको समझ आ जाएगा ना?
हाँ हाँ, कोई दिक्कत नहीं।
Could you say something so that we could figure out how good the voice sounds now?
Okay, how do I sound?
Yeah.
Okay, ma'am.
Seems good. Seems good.
Is that better? Is that better for everybody?
Yes,
Yes, it's
okay.
better.
I'll keep the headphones on for you.
Sounds good.
मैम शुरू कर लो।
मनीषा है?
Yes, ma'am.
Dear all, good evening to all of you. On behalf of the Psychology Association of Mata Sundari College and on my own behalf, I extend a hearty welcome to all dear ones connected with us at the present moment. The Psychology Association comprises all students and faculty of the Department of Psychology. It is a forum for exchange of ideas and enhancement of learning in the discipline. An attempt is made via this to engage the students in activities that provide them both joie de vivre and intellectual enhancement. The present virtual mode has left us with less cheer, but nonetheless, in order to keep the learning curve going, the inspiration and support for which comes from the institutional head, Principal Professor Harpreet Kaur, the association has requested a distinguished clinical and practicing psychologist to inaugurate the activities of the association for the present term. Thank you, Cindy, for joining us. May I now request Dr. Manisha Mathur, the Deputy Coordinator of the College IQAC, to apprise the participants with the instructions. Over to you, Manisha.
Good evening. Yes, thank you, ma'am. Good evening, everyone. Before we begin the session, here are a few instructions. Please switch off your video. Please do not click on the share screen button. You also have to keep your devices on mute. In case your connection gets disrupted, then please join back using the same link. Another request, please put your questions in the chat box and refrain from putting greetings there because the questions get lost. Attendance cum feedback form will be shared in the chat box after the session is over. You're requested to fill the feedback. That is very valuable for us. E-certificates will be sent on your registered email ID within 7 days, and all the participants are requested to switch on their videos after the vote of thanks so as to facilitate a photograph of all present. Thank you, and over to you, Sandhu ma'am.
Over the past 1 year, I have repeatedly expressed our gratitude to Professor Harpreet Kaur for envisioning a path of constant growth and evolution for our institution. I hold in my heart a belief that she is inspired by our illustrious founder, Mata Sundari ji, and she will continue to transmit that inspiration to us all. As a leader, she comes across as someone committed to creating an environment where the capabilities and capacities of her colleagues are augmented, the evidence of which lies in the fact that she converted the present adverse situation and appended it into a phase of intense learning for us all. Hence, ma'am, it is with gratitude for all that you uphold that I extend you a warm welcome at this maiden event of the Psychological Association in the present term. And once again, on behalf of the Psychology Association, on behalf of the Department of Psychology, the senior colleagues and my co-worker my colleague and co-worker in the Psychology Association, Dr. Garima, I extend a very warm welcome to you, ma'am. And thank you for continuing to support us. And I look forward to continue being of help and support to the institution. Thank you, ma'am. Over to you. Dr. Harpreet Kaur. Thank you, ma'am.
Good evening, and thank you, Dr. Harinder Sandhu, for being so extravagant in your praises. Thank you so much. And I really welcome Cindy, Dr. Cindy, and I'm seeing her profile. It is very enriching. She has worked with different institutions, whether it is US Customs or Border Protection, and she has done many things. So I am sure we will really be enriched with what actually is what she is going to speak. And with this, I also want to welcome Dr. Garima and also Dr. Lokesh and Manisha and all others who are a part of it. And also all the people who are participating in it, all the students who are there, because across borders, I think there are certain differences. I think Dr. Cindy is going to speak about these differences, because human agency, as I believe, is at the center of psychology also and the culture also. Because it is through human agency the cultures are operating, or we are affecting the cultures largely by our thought and process. And cultures affect us quite a lot, because it is very easy to associate with one's culture and accordingly act. And it is so natural and so instinctive for us to be a part and parcel. So I think you are a practicing psychologist, and of course I am not, but what I understand is across borders, there is going to be a lot of differences. Even if I say not across borders, if I just spell out India, because India, it might be one unit, but we have so many cultures, subcultures in it, and so many religions, so many languages, that if we have the stress among the people is really of different kind. So the youth is coming up with these kind of psychological issues quite a lot, and I'm really surprised that even as a child aged 10 or 11, they are undergoing tension and psychological pressures. Why? This is a really a question mark is there, and why this is happening in this kind of a scenario. I think you all from Department of Psychology can work on this and tell us why these kind of pressures are coming at the very youth level. Earlier, we could never imagine that this kind of a thing could happen to a child also, but this is actually proven also. So what I understand is that culture can be a solution to the problems also, because I can associate myself with my culture and I can think within that framework very easily. And so if I am related to my culture, I understand the whole concept and all the history of my background, then I can relate to it. And those psychological pressures which are coming because of other cultures, for example, maybe the market culture. maybe wherever the institution I'm working, that institution might be different from my cultural background, and that can create a lot of pressure for me also. So that adjustment becomes very simple if I understand myself. Who am I? What is my background? What is my aim? And then I can find solutions within myself, because I understand that all the psychological solutions emerge within oneself, and the solution is also within oneself. So you have to understand, and you have to create this kind of awareness that this is what I will not do and this is what I should do. So if you are doing research on the psychology, then of course cultural parameters work quite a lot, and you can have certain differences, I suppose, when you are working across cultures. So that is why I think you will tell us how the same thing might not be a problem within one particular country, but same thing might be a problem in my country. And for example, those kind of outfit changes or the dressing changes which are coming in India also, because of the Western influence, maybe my culture doesn't allow me, and my parents tell me don't wear this, and it's not. But because my peer group is there, and because that kind of a competition is there, I am really forced to wear it, because otherwise I'm not those progressive and modern ones. So this kind of things can create a lot of tension and a lot of petty things they are, but they are going to they might create a lot of pressure on you. So how to find solution to it? So that I think psychology department is really working very hard and trying to connect with the students. And this particular activity of the Psychology Association is one where we are going to address the issues, the small issues which can convert into big problems if we don't take the solutions a step in time. And so this is one kind of it's a beginning, and we will also have more kind of activities where we'll spell out to the students that this is the way you should think. And I think one thing very easily I can sum up and say that be positive with the things, and you will always find a solution to it. And so with this word, again, I really thank my team, and again, and also welcome Cindy again. Thank you.
Thank you, ma'am. And thank you very much, Dr. Lokesh Kumar Gupta, the coordinator of the IQAC, and Dr. Manisha Mathur, deputy coordinator, for facilitating this event. May I now hand over to you, Dr. Cindy Dominique. It has been a pleasure to be able to have you, even though virtually. Brings back memories of 2016, 17, 18.
Yes.
Thank you. Thank you for sparing the time. And over to you, Cindy.
Thank you, everyone. Good evening, good evening, good evening. I want to thank the Mata Sundry College for Women for giving me this invitation to speak about my experiences as a psychologist. I want to thank Dr. Garima, Dr. Harinda, Dr. Lokesh, Professor Harpreet, Dr. Manisha, everyone in accordance for bringing this together and putting this together for all the students here. There's so many different things at play, and forgive me in advance because I have allergies and I sound like a man. So I apologize in advance if you can't hear me or some of the things sound muffled. No problem. We'll try to get around it, but thank you again. So I want to talk about the practice of psychology overall. I've worked in so many different areas of psychology, or arenas, as one says. The thing about psychology is no matter where you go or what area that you're working is, you have to be aware, situationally aware. Whether you're working in private practice, whether you're working in a mental health hospital, or whether you're working with law enforcement, or no matter what you're doing in the world of psychology, the first step is awareness. Awareness of yourself and awareness of the people that you're working with. Sorry. I'm a native New Yorker, so I'm a little rough around the edges, but my family also came from Haiti as a first generation immigrant family. As Dr. Harpreet indicated, talking about cultures. Cultures plays a role in everything that we do. And how do we connect with the people who differ from us? Currently, I'm in private practice and I have like 50 clients, and my clients range the gamut of cultures and subcultures. The youngest client that I have is 16 years old, whereas the oldest client I have is 67 years old, and he's a white male. And I have clients coming to me specifically because I am a woman of color, and I inform my clients that I have been to therapy. I continue to go to therapy because I can't practice. If I don't practice what I preach, how would people connect with me? So it is important as psychology students that everyone should get the experience of going to therapy, because it does take a lot of courage, and you're putting yourself in this vulnerable spot to open up to somebody. So to some degree, it's important for you to understand how much it takes to be in that seat. So I always tell everybody, go to therapy. It's so important. Now, the 4 areas that I want to speak about that I've worked in, more specifically, I've worked in prisons, private practice, mental health centers, outpatient, and law enforcement. As far as private practice, I started my own private practice last April during the beginning of COVID, and by the grace of God, I've been able to flourish. And people are coming because people with COVID, people were disconnected. They weren't able to see their family. They weren't able to see their friends. You couldn't hug and even just go out to the corner store and just walk and see the sights because we were placed in these bubbles. So connection is really important. And I think that's why my business is thriving, because the connection people want and people need to have. So no matter where you go, whatever field or area of psychology, is about situational awareness and connecting. If you keep those 2 things first and foremost, you're going to always have people coming to you and you're going to be successful, because as Dr. Preet said, understanding yourself is important. So I worked 4.5 years in the Federal Bureau of Prisons, and I worked at a primarily male institution. So we had a low, which was the minimum amount of security. We had a camp, low, and a medium security. I worked in the medium security. And so you have people of all different ages, colors. You had Aryan Nation, which are white supremacists. You had different gangs, either Black Guerrilla Mafia, Mexican Mafia, all these different things. So when I would go into a housing unit or a segregation unit, I would have to pull people out. And as a psychologist, one would think that that's not my job because I'm not custody. But if you're working in the federal institution, your first job is custody, which is the safety and the security of the institution. Although I'm a psychologist, that came after the fact. So if I went to a segregation unit or a housing unit and I needed to see someone for psychological purposes, I had to kind of gear up and go and pull them out, put the handcuffs on and pull them out so I could see them. Sometimes they were backed up. The other officers were backed up. So I would have to do that. And understanding again, I worked with every different culture, nationality, you name it. So imagine a Black woman going into a prison and putting my hands, like literally touching a white supremacist. You would think that they would call me all types of names and everything like that. But the one thing was, it was a show of respect. No matter where you are, where you work, respect is paramount. And yes, I was called several names day in, day out. But when it came time to that, they knew who I was. They knew my ethics and how I respected them, no matter their charge. There were sex offenders in the prison, you name it, murderers, drug dealers. But when a person allows me to touch them and they have different views and they think of me as lesser than, and there's a connection there, that's power. So even though there was these separate differences and they had these very distinct views, they allowed me to work with them. Somehow or another, I connected with them. And the connection comes from awareness, understanding myself, and respect. Now, moving on to mental health centers. And in the United States or different states, for example, since I live in Maryland, I'll take it from Maryland. Maryland has different counties, and each county has a health department. Within the health department, there's a subcategory of a mental health department. And there in the mental health centers, people will come in with varying degrees of disorder and varying degrees of payment. Some people couldn't pay because they didn't have the resources, financial resources, whereas others had insurance and they were able to pay. So again, you never know what you're going to get when you have a person. They could be sitting there looking perfectly fine, but they might have issues of thoughts or just disordered thinking, and they might see you as a threat, and they might try to attack you. And it's not personal, it's just their thinking is distorted. So again, it goes back to no matter where you are, always be situationally aware, understanding yourself, and respect. There was one time I was working and I was going to clients' homes. This client happened to be Hawaiian and he had some cognitive deficits. He loved watching the cooking shows back in the days in Food Channel. And so one day I went to his house and I was working with him and he had a butcher knife and he was acting as if he was a chef and he was cutting up some steak. But he got a phone call from one of his case managers who was an agitator. She irritated him. And understand he had cognitive deficits. If she irritated me and I didn't have cognitive deficits, imagine that person. So at that point, he had the butcher knife in his hand and he was cursing her out, but he was becoming more and more hostile. I had my eye on the front door and his apartment balcony and recognizing those are my two areas for escape if anything happened. So what I had to do was diffuse the situation to some degree. I was like, let me take care of it. You keep cooking because I want to see what you're cooking and what's the product, what's the final outcome. And I said, let me talk to that lady, the case manager. So in that sense, I had him focus on his food because that was the most important thing for him. But again, I was situationally aware. If it progressed even higher, what is my way to escape? You're always looking out for the place to leave and protect yourself. But after a while, I had a relationship with him because he felt as if I protected him because food was the most important thing. It doesn't matter what it is, but you have to find a way to connect with that individual. For him, he wanted to be a chef. So as we're watching Emerald Lagasse cooking his shows, keep watching that because I believe in you and I know you're going to be a chef. You really do have to think on your feet because anything can happen in the blink of an eye. So awareness, and I'm going to keep drilling this in, situational awareness. Now, when it comes to law enforcement, even though when I worked in the prisons, I was identified as federal law enforcement, when I worked with Border Patrol or Customs and Protection, I worked with the law enforcement agents and their families. And understand, there are people who have different belief systems. Yes, I am a Black woman who is a Democrat, but when there's something in the sense of connecting with people on loss, all those things go out the window. People who really thought differently of me. But when I came into their homes humbly. I asked for permission to do this, to work with them, and they recognized I was there to support them. So regardless of my beliefs and regardless of their beliefs, we came to a connection in the sense of loss. How do we work through this loss? And for people to allow me to come into their space that they feel safe in, and someone who's totally different from them, that you have to find a way to connect. And I think that was one of the most beautiful things that each one of us have a gift. My gift seems to be I can translate into any form of culture to help support that person in their time of need. And if I don't know something, then I ask that individual to educate me, help me to understand what's going on, because you really have to humble yourself. Yeah, I'm a doctor, but I don't go into people's homes and say, well, I'm this and I know this. Negative. You have to be humble in your approach. You have to find a way to connect. And if it means connecting because the person has a pet, connect with them in that way. I have a dog, so I use my dog a lot to diffuse situations. And he's a little fluffy, so they like looking at him. And even the hardest, sternest people, if you find that one thing that you know that you could get your foot in the door, use that as the approach. And so, bottom line, in these different areas, the one thing I could say time and time again is connecting, situational awareness, and understanding yourself. If you maintain those things, you can go wherever you want to go in this world. And you don't even have to speak the same language, because we understand language is not only verbal, it's nonverbal. How do we communicate with our bodies? My dog, he'll tell me when he's happy because his tail is wagging back and forth. But he's not telling me that verbally, but I'm watching every aspect of him, the whole being. So when you're working with an individual, you look at that whole being from the nonverbals. If they're coming to you and they're saying that they're fine, but their hands are shaking, are they really fine? No. So that means you have to look at all the different things that's bringing this person to this table. When I used to work for the federal government, I started work at 6 o'clock in the morning. So I'm taking public transportation at 5:30 or 5:15. I would sit in the back of the train because I could see everybody coming on and coming off. And sometimes you have people who have mental disorders talking to themselves and responding to internal stimuli on the train. And I would just sit back and watch. I'm observant, but I'm also situationally aware. And I think part of that is because I'm from New York and I worked in prisons. So if I'm going up an escalator, I don't go up the escalator like this. I stand to the side because I want to see who's coming down and who's coming up. To some degree, I am a product of my environment, but that has been that's been helpful to me in every aspect of my education, my experience, and my life as a whole, because I look at things from another perspective. And granted, I might be a little bit hyper vigilant, but it is important because it could save a life and it could actually save your life. And connecting, being aware, and understanding yourself. So I hope I was able to give you a little bit about the practice of psychology. And I want to see if we could open it up for questions now, and let me know what else you guys want to talk about.
For the moment, Cindy, we have one question, but we can open the house. There is a question from a student who says that, is it difficult to work with clients who are different? Does that cause resistance during therapy?
So, is it difficult to work with people who are different? No, because no matter who you're working with, everybody is different. My sisters and I, we grew up in the same house, but we're different. And how they approach things is different from me. So no matter what, just know there's always going to be a difference. Even if you grew up in the same household and your family, there's always differences, small or large. What was the second portion of the question? Oh, you're mute.
The second part of the question is, does that cause resistance during therapy?
Okay. I don't want to say that specifically causes resistance. For example, I used to work with substance abusers in DC, and all of the substance abusers that I worked with came through the criminal justice system. So they were either DC pretrial, the probation office, and these clients were mandated to treatment. And a lot of times when you're mandated to do something, you're not really wanting to do it, but you're forced to do it. And with that population, I had to take into consideration, because they're mandated, they're going to be resistant. But in the world of psychology, You have to meet the individual where they are. So there was one client, he was reluctant and resistant, but I had to let him know, listen, you're here because you're mandated. Whether you want to participate or not, you have to do it. But while you're here, let's make the most of it. And you never know what you could get out of it. And by the end of his time doing individual therapy, he was like, wow, I really appreciated it. I didn't think I needed it. And it's your approach. I use a sense of humor a lot of time. In my head, I'm a comedian. So I have to find a way to crack a joke or something to diffuse that armor that individual has. And once I get my foot in the door, then I can take them down. But you have to use what's at your disposal at that moment. For me, again, I use a sense of humor, and I'm always joking about something. People like, how can you joke about something like that? I said, because laughter is the natural medicine to diffuse anything. I hope that answered the question.
Yes, sounds like it. The second question is there's a student who asks you, good morning. I wanted to ask you, what would you recommend to a psychology student looking to work at the intersection of research and clinical practice, a PhD or a Psy.d?
Psy.d.
Okay.
And I would, and the reason why I say Psy.d, well,
personal bias here.
I say Psy.d because in the program that I attended, yes, I had to do research. I had to do research in all my classes, and my dissertation incorporated research, but it was really practitioner focused. And it's a lot. And we did 2 years of practicums and then another year of the residency or the internship. So it's a combination, if you ask me. And I think a Psy.d is so much better. I might be partial.
There's a student of ours from the final outgoing semester who says, in your experience, what has been the most difficult or challenging thing about being a psychologist?
Wow, that's a difficult question. Because it's hard to separate being a psychologist from being a Black woman. And that's a hard question because I don't know how to answer it. Because on one hand, it might be me being a Black woman and working in the world or living in the world where I have 3 degrees and I'm working with a white law enforcement officer who has no education, just a high school diploma, and there is some jealousy or a threat to some degree. Honestly, that's a good question, but I don't know how to answer it. Because in my head, I can't separate the two between me being a psychologist and me being a Black woman, because the first thing that you see when you see me is that I'm a woman and I'm a Black woman. And people make judgments based off of that. And so when I introduce myself as a psychologist, there's a lot of like, serious? You're a psychologist? Because I'm not the typical view of when you see a psychologist.
Yep. We have another student who wants to know, I wanted to ask you how to stay empathetic and compassionate while at the same time maintaining your objectivity as a professional. Wonderful.
Okay, that's a very, very good question. How to stay empathetic and compassionate while all the while being a professional. So
while maintaining your objectivity as a professional.
Now, with my clients in private practice, I'll joke with them over and over, but they know I joke with them, but I can be very firm with them, and so they know. And so this is a term here in America, snatching somebody's edges. And my clients say, Dr. Dominique, snatch my edges, meaning I'm going to hold you accountable. I'm still going to show grace. empathy and compassion, but I'm going to hold you accountable and set boundaries with you because that is important. And so we know sometimes the lines can be blurred, but if you demonstrate compassion, empathy, but hold the person accountable, then there's the respect. And that's why the individual keeps coming back because they know they can't get over on certain things. Yes, you're here to support me, but you're not one to be abused either.
Yep. There's another question from a student, Anushka Shetri, who wants to know, how can we deal with people who do not trust others easily or like to open up in front of others?
Ooh, that's a loaded question because it takes, first of all, it takes practice. And you have to understand where that individual is coming from, whatever occurred in their world, hence the reason why they're reluctant and they're standoffish. For example, yesterday I had a contact call from a psychiatrist of a patient, and the patient is a 67-year-old white male. The psychiatrist informed me that she's been working with this client for a couple of months. And I've only worked with him 3 sessions, the intake and 2 sessions after that. In those 3 sessions, I was able to garner or gather more information about this client than this psychiatrist was able to do in months. And she's like, this is the first conversation I had with her yesterday. She said, I'm really amazed and impressed that you were able to find out this information so quickly. And what can I say? I'm gifted. That's a joke. Okay. You're supposed to laugh, guys. I need to see people laughing. No, but you have to understand again, people come with a lot of baggage and a lot of fears. And you have to do your best to make them feel comfortable. I say, I need my clients to be intimate with me, and intimate and not in a romantic or sexual way. When I define intimacy, I talk about being present, being authentic and genuine, being vulnerable, feeling safe, and trust. So I tell my clients, I want you to be intimate with me, and I have to be intimate with you. And when you identify that, then there comes another level like, wow. And I do engage in some self-disclosure. So that way to show them I'm no different than you. I'm just like you. I'm a human being. I have issues. I have problems. I go to therapy. I do this. I do that. I cry. I get depressed. I get angry. And it's humanization, making them feel human. And Professor Harpreet also noticed that, indicated that earlier, human agency. You have to show that you're human just like them. And once they see that there isn't a power differential and we're on the same playing field, then they start opening up and they're not as reluctant to be as vulnerable as, I mean, they're not as reluctant to be closed off and start opening it up a little by little by little. That's it.
There's a student who wishes to know if she were to study clinical psychology and if she were to study in the US, would it be difficult? Because if she were to practice, how would she deal with the cultural difference of education in another country and practice back in her own country?
Well, so the education is the foundation, but because the client, the student knows the culture of, so you just traverse that over. You take the information and you work it in a way that's going to, people are going to be able to understand and respond to it in your specific culture. For example, yes, I'm Haitian. And Haitians are not known for going to therapy. That's not a word in our language. So, as one of the first people in my family to say, I need help and I'm going to therapy, it was an education that I I did the education as far as me going to school, but I had to educate my family members as to the importance of therapy. Just like you're going to a medical doctor, then you're going to go to a psychological doctor to give you the support that you need. And a lot of times it's about education. And wherever you go, you have to learn the culture and the people that you're with. And it's not even about cultures as far as countries. When I started working with Border Patrol, that's a culture within itself. The culture of Border Patrol, it was different from the culture of me working in the federal prisons versus the culture of me working in private practice. No matter where you go, you have to learn the culture of where you're working. But take the information that you have. The baseline is the education, and you can traverse it across all the different cultures.
How can another of our outgoing students, how can a therapist be mindful of some random triggers that might make him/her vulnerable during the session?
For them to go to therapy. Again, understanding yourself. If you've never been to therapy and you don't know what your personal triggers are, that's a problem, because it could bleed over into the therapy session with the client. And then instead of you being the therapist, you're trying to process your stuff while you're getting paid for somebody else's stuff. And that's why it's so important to know yourself and knowing your own boundaries. There are certain populations I just can't work with because I might have a certain bias towards it. For example, when I worked in the federal prisons, there was a sex offender management program. And I don't like sex offenders, so I couldn't do that because I know I wouldn't be the best support to give them unbiased therapy. Whereas with substance abusers, that's a whole nother ball game. And for me, I was able to do that. But sex offenders, yeah, no, my empathy is out the window with that. Sorry. I'm just being honest.
Have you ever faced a situation where your therapy wasn't working for the person, and what would you do if you were to face such a situation?
Yes, that has happened, and understand there are people that you just don't connect with, or it's not a good fit. Um, but as long as you try, let's see what we can do. And I tell clients, my particular style and how I work may not be a good fit for you. And I tell people also, going to therapy is like trying on a pair of shoes. When you go to a store, you try them on. It might be a little too tight. It might be a little too loose. Therefore, it's important that you try different therapists until you find one that fits.
A lot of students want, and attendees want to know, how do you handle the stress that spills over into your life from the problems that your clients face?
So earlier in my career, I didn't know how to separate. However, now that I've been doing it for quite some time, I'm much better at it. And now in my head, I know that part of it is I'm doing a job, and I'm providing a service to the people who are paying me. But when I worked in Border Patrol and when I worked in the federal prisons, it really wasn't the issues of the individuals or the clients. It was more so the external things, such as the bureaucracy, such as the racism, such as the sexism, that caused more issues for me versus the issues that clients came to therapy for. And a lot of times it's the external things. Yeah, as far as the topics, I've been around and I've done my work, so that way I'm not as impacted personally by the topics, because we understand that life is not pretty for a lot of people, and that's why they need the support. And when we know that they may have been abused and they may have experienced this and may have experienced that, your job is to help them to get to a place where they can thrive versus survive.
Do you think as a psychologist, when you cannot help a client or cannot get through their walls, does that distress you emotionally as well?
It can, because then I go in my head and I'm like, well, maybe you're not good enough, Cindy, and what is your problem? So that's always a thought in my head. It's a negative thinking because we want to do a good job. Well, I know I want to do a good job and I want to give my clients the best of me. However, I know I'm not God. I can't, how do you say, help or save everybody. But if I'm having some difficulty with the client, then I do peer consultation and ask my colleagues, I need some support because this is what I've been doing with this client and it doesn't seem to be clicking. I need your insight to help me think of some other ways to best support this individual. And if we try different mechanisms or interventions and it doesn't work, then they may not be ready or I may not be the best person for them. But as long as we tried, that's all I can say and do, is because we made an effort.
What do you think is one major factor which helped you grow as a professional over the years of practicing?
One more time, please.
One more time?
Yes.
I could answer that for you. The student wants to know, what do you think is one major factor which helped you grow as a professional over years of practice?
That's a complex question and a complex answer. It's not just one thing. Everything that I brought to the table, growing up in New York, going to school out of state, and being independent, all those things come and bring me to the place that I am. So all my life experiences and circumstances that I've been through have brought me to this place. It's not just one thing, it's everything from my social environment, my physical environment, the things that I suffered, the things that I've witnessed, I've observed, that I smelled. Every part of my being brought me to this place to be the best that I am. So that's really, really difficult. I would just say life in itself. And I've had a lot of experiences and I've suffered through trauma where, okay, Cindy, you could understand certain things and you could understand what's the motivating factor or drive that's pushing these people for them to behave or to think in this way. So I can't parcel it out like a slice of pizza. It's all encompassing. It's the total being.
How can a therapist deal with positive transference of a patient? And what if the patient had to gather a lot of courage to start therapy sessions and might not go to some other therapist, if you suggest that to them?
Okay, I'm confused by the question.
If there was a patient who reported positive transference, and if you were wanting to disassociate, I gather what she means is that if you wanted, then after recognizing transference, you wanted to disassociate.
Okay.
But it had taken originally a lot of courage for the patient to start therapy and may not go to another person. How do you handle that? What do you suggest to that?
So I would tell them that is what life is about. We have to grow and we have to explore and keep on moving. Who I was when I was 25 is not the same person that I am right now at this present state. So yes, there might be some transference. And if you stay here, it may not be the best for you, but I still want you to get the support that you need. So I would encourage you to try different things. Do you have the same hairstyle for 25 years? No. Do you have the same nail polish color for 25 years? No, it's about change. It's important to grow and evolve. And I can only do but so much with you for right now. Now you need another teacher to help take you to the next level. And part of my job is to set boundaries and be clear on, okay, there's some other things going on, and it's not going to be the best for you or for me if we continue in this manner. So my job is to see where else we could take you and who else I could transfer you to.
While working with federal prisoners, have you experienced resistance from other stakeholders involved in the process?
Yes.
Prison authority? And give us advice on how to handle that resistance.
Yes, but you have to know that you're in the prison system to begin with. And a lot of times, custody and the safety and security of the institution is the primary goal. So when it comes to psychology, psychology would be a secondary thing. If the prison was on lockdown, then I can't really go and see a client to do psychology because the prison's in lockdown. And you have to go with the flow. You have to be adaptable. And with every place and everything you do, there's always going to be a barrier. So how do you deal with the barriers presented? Okay, we're going to be on lockdown maybe for a couple of days, but after that time frame, then maybe I could see the client, or it might be a particular captain or a lieutenant or custody officer who has issues, and you just have to adapt, bottom line.
How do psychologists manage their personal biases with clients who reveal guilt about dark and bad crimes for which they should be punished they've done, which made them come for therapy?
So when I worked for the federal prisons, but I also worked for the state prison in Maryland. And the state prison in Maryland was a female institution. These were women, some who killed their children. And that was always something like, how do you kill your child? Like, why would you have a child to kill your child? And some were under the influence of substances. Some gave their child up so they can be abused, sexually abused. So that means I have to work through my stuff in order to give the client the support that they need. When I worked in the women's prison, I wouldn't read a lot of their files, because once I read their files, then I would become biased. And I said, Cindy, you have a job to do. If you start reading all the nuances or the particulars of their charges or the situations that brought them there, you can't provide them the best support that they need. So I had to be mindful about that I wouldn't necessarily do that until at all, or until I needed to. So I would have had already established a relationship with that client before I go find out more information about the charges and what brought them to this place of ugliness and how they're trying to work through. But again, that's why I had to understand myself and like, okay, Cindy, you can't do that. You have to have clear boundaries and separate the two.
How do you draw the line between understanding and being empathetic towards a criminal and being the devil's advocate?
I didn't think my job was to be a devil's advocate. My job working in the prisons and working with criminals is that I'm there to help them get to a place where they can stop engaging in the behavior. And if I focus on that, then I'm not thinking about all the other things. And can you read that question again, Harinda? Oh, you're
How
on
do you
mute.
draw the line between being understanding, being empathetic toward the criminal and being the devil's advocate?
Okay. And like I said, there are clients who were in my program. I ran a drug program in the prisons, the federal prisons. And there were a lot of clients who had sex abuse charges. Okay. But while we're here, we're focusing on the drugs, and we're focusing on how the drugs led you to possibly engage in criminal behavior, such as abusing a child or rape or murder or whatever. Again, I'm focused on what issues they present with me presently, and I can't go back and change the behavior that brought them here. But let's see how we can move forward to see that when you're released, if you ever get released, how will you be able to manage and live a life on the outside without engaging in the things that you did initially? But you have to put those things aside. And again, it comes with dealing with your own stuff. If you haven't identified those things, if you're not aware of those things that might take you to a place where you throw some hot coffee on a patient, that's a problem.
Does too much of objectivity and mechanistic analysis of behavior all the time obstruct the natural course of spontaneous life events, which might be the best way?
Are you asking that question from a personal experience?
No.
I mean, no, not you, but from a personal perspective, are they asking that question from a personal perspective for me?
I think they're asking. I think they're asking you your take on this issue. As a therapist, as a person who works with people or working with clients, is probably your take on that issue.
And can you read the question again, please?
There's too much of objectivity and mechanistic analysis of behavior all the time obstruct the natural course of spontaneous life events, which might be the best way. I like to add to that. Actually, I was thinking along those lines. You mentioned hypervigilance.
Yes.
And yeah, so my own question also at that point was that, does hypervigilance not lead to fatigue, which then impacts the ability to provide therapy or to retain empathy in therapy along with objectivity?
It can. And when I say that, I felt that more so in the federal male prison versus working with the women's prison. And no, let me switch that around. I felt that actually more with the women than I did with the men. Because I'm a woman, just like the women in the prison, they were more likely to probably assault me because I'm a woman than if I were in the male facility. Because you have varying levels of respect in the male facility. You have the old heads who've been there for a long time, and then once you start, they see who you are and how you portray yourself. They start to police themselves. Whereas the women in the female institution, they didn't care whether you were a woman or not. If they wanted to assault you, they would. So hypervigilance can get you, because you're always on, meaning you're extra aware, and that requires energy and effort. And it can lead to where you become more subjective versus objective. Honestly, yes, there have been times, but that's when you recognize it and you process that with either a supervisor, peer consultation, or you go to your own therapy. So there's mechanisms there to discuss it so that way you can be aware and constantly check in. It's a system of checks and balances, basically. And although I'm in private practice, I'm not by myself, where I have my colleagues who I can ask questions to. I need your help with this. Help me to understand how I portrayed, or how what I brought to the table in this particular situation. So I would say it's a system of checks and balances. And at times, yes, that can happen.
The field of psychology advances every day. As a practicing psychologist, how does one keep up, learn, unlearn, and evolve ways with new information coming in every day?
So I every 2 years, because I'm licensed, I have to do at least 40 hours of continuing education trainings in order to make sure my license stays applicable. So education. I'm constantly reading and learning. I learn a lot from my clients. I learn a lot from what's happening in the world. I learn a lot from the latest and greatest therapies, and let me find out more information. You have to do research and you have to evolve, just like any medical professional has to do continuing education. So once you learn and you have a degree, that doesn't mean that you stop learning. That's the whole thing of life, is that you're constantly learning and constantly evolving. And once you take that, then okay, excuse me, so you recognize you have a foundation, but there's always room to grow and there's always room to learn and become better.
On self-disclosure, how do you, as a therapist, set the boundary as when to stop? How much is too little and how much is too much?
That's a very, very good question. Um, so in private practice is different for me than it was in prisons, because we understand prisoners or inmates, a lot of them manipulate. And so imagine me telling them certain parts of my world and my life, and then they start digging away and trying to connect with me. They're masters of manipulation. And people who are in private practice, clients, they are as well. However, you use what you need in order to help them just a little smidgen, and then you remove it. So when I'm talking to clients and when I'm doing therapy with clients in private practice, I let them know, yes, I've gone to therapy. I still go to therapy because I have to be the best version of me at all times. And if I'm taking in information day in, day out of people's lives, I got to take care of myself. And that goes with me practicing what I preach. To some degree, I have to model the behavior for my clients. And if I want them to believe in the process of therapy, then for me, I'm showing them this is what I'm doing, and this is what I want you and I need you to do as well. But again, it's a system of checks and balances where I speak with my colleagues, supervisors in other areas that I've worked in. I need your help with this. How did this go? What do you think about this? Did I give too much information? So I'm constantly assessing and evaluating.
Do you think being exposed to so many vulnerable people desensitizes you to certain emotions?
Nope. No, not at all. However, there are times that because I deal with so many different topics and situations, I do have to protect my own mental health. So last year, and as you guys know, the world over, George Floyd was killed by a white police officer in Minnesota, and currently the trial is happening. As a Black woman who was working for the Border Patrol, who was living and working through the racism and sexism and discrimination on a daily, I couldn't watch the news. And what I do is I try to watch comedy. So there are certain things I just don't watch. I haven't watched 12 Years a Slave. I haven't watched a lot of different films that are going to take me down further. So I do protect myself and watch comedy. And what can I do to not, how do you say, poison myself with all that life has to offer and all the ugliness? Because if I stay in that realm, then I'm no good to anybody.
While working with so many criminal clients, have you ever felt this client is actually evil? If yes, how have you dealt with that?
What was the last part?
If yes, how have you dealt with that?
Okay. So let me just say this. Even though I worked in the prisons, male, female, sometimes it seemed as if the co-workers were worse than the inmates. So, Border Patrol, these men with these huge egos, and they talk about a brotherhood, a fraternity, but there was no code of honor. And I would see them engage in behaviors that I wouldn't see with the inmates in the prisons, because the inmates in the prisons had a code of honor and there was a code of respect. Whereas with the law enforcement, you would think that they would, but to some degree, I thought there were times that I thought they were more evil than the inmates. So, yeah.
That should bring us to the end of the questions, but my colleague wanted to ask you a question, and I think it's only fair that she can ask it herself. So, Dr. Garima, you could please ask your own questions.
Yes.
And I hand over to Dr. Garima.
Thank you so much, Haridhan ma'am. And it's really been wonderful. I mean, awesome listening to you. And I wish it could go on and on and on. And you made it so simple and so interactive. My one question to you is that, of course, there is, you need to be creating a balance between objectivity but how important sometimes it is to be able to share your personal experience, sometimes to be able to build connect with your clients and vis-a-vis the objectivity. So would you totally refrain from it and not suggest it? And also, picking up from another student's question, isn't sometimes positive transference welcome in therapy? To be able to build that connect in the first place, and then move beyond it and try out various options. So I'm not from the clinical field per se, so my understanding will not be that astute as yours. So I would want your enlightened views.
So the first question was, is self-disclosure good? Yes. It can be, and as far as the connection, it can be important, because again, going back to when somebody comes to therapy, they're looking at you as the professional, but they have a image, an idealized image of you as this professional, that you haven't experienced any of these things and you haven't suffered or anything, because you appear to be well put together, right? But everybody wears a mask every single day. Right. And once you remove that mask, or once you pull back the curtains, you're like, wow, you're just like everybody else. And so that's why it's important for me to show people I'm just like everybody else. I am no different. I have issues with my sisters sometimes. I have issues with other family members, but I'm human. And I want to normalize it. And I attempt to normalize that I am just like everybody else. And I'm not a role model. I'm just a person this was my chosen career, and I was determined to sustain or achieve that goal of mine. But that doesn't mean that I haven't fallen. That doesn't mean I haven't been bruised and disappointed and hurt and just hurt, because I'm human. And I let people know that all the time. And Dr. Garima, what was the second part of the question? You said about positive interference. Can it be actually a good thing?
Positive transference to begin with, isn't it really desirable?
And I don't want to necessarily use the word desirable, but it can be a useful tool. Absolutely. Because I have had clients who said they were attracted to me. But they were attracted to me because I was providing them support. In the sense, I was the only one who ever felt like, who gave them positive praise, who gave them a high five for doing well. And so, of course, that comes into play. But then that's when we bring it into the therapy session and say, let's talk about that. In essence, you're really not attracted to me in the physical sense, but you're attracted to the fact that I'm here to provide you support.
Provide support. I'm not really talking about transference in a very intimate, romantic sense, as you just said. It could be support of various kinds. I mean, you could be relating to multiple significant others in your family and bringing that into the situation.
I think it can be important. You just have to know how to do it. It's like a dance, and you have to be mindful about it. And again, it's a system of checks and balances. I'm not saying completely no, but I'm not saying completely yes either.
No, I completely understand. Yes, I
Mhm.
appreciate that. Thank you so much. Thank you, Cindy.
Thank you. Very, very great question. Thank you.
Thank you. And now, I mean, it's really been a very, very engaging session, Cindy. It's been very fascinating being with you. And you've shared your experiences about working with different cultures. It's certainly given you a very distinct kind of perspective and advantage. And I'm sure that with all of your understanding of the cultural nuances and how it plays out in diverse settings, be it law enforcement, be it border patrol, be it your connections at the private practice level, I'm sure that all of us, our students, the faculty alike, all of us have really, really gained out of what you've shared. And the success mantra that you suggest for connecting, for building that connectivity, the situationally aware, astute awareness that you talk about, the respect and the humility. Let me tell you, all of those qualities, it's not just about preaching. I mean, you exude that in your personality as well. And that's the most wonderful thing about you, Cindy. And we're really honored to have you amongst us. Thank you so much. You've spared your time out of your busy schedule. And the COVID period, definitely it has its disadvantage. But the fact that we've been able to connect with you online, I think this association, this connect will continue for years to come. And we hope to have you physically sometime when the situation permits. So it's really, really nice. And it's been wonderful. And
thank you so much, Dr. Garima. I'm getting tears in my eyes because
the privilege is all ours of having you amongst us. It's really been very, very nice.
And live and breathe it every day.
Thank you so much. And before we close off, I will fail in my duty if I do not acknowledge the institutional support for this counseling session.
Yes.
My real heartfelt gratitude, first and foremost, to our Madam Principal, Professor Harpreet Kaur. Ma'am, you've always provided solid support, guidance in all that we accomplish in all our endeavors. Your encouragement all the way through really means a lot, ma'am. Our institution, as we've already said time and again, and reiterating it again, that it's been a positive learning growth spurt for us. Under your leadership, it's indeed been, in fact, a complete transformation since you took over, a cultural transformation. And we can't thank you enough for just being there all the way through. Thank you so much, Dr. Harinder Sandhu, ma'am, who's a senior colleague at my own Department of Psychology, of having introduced us to such a wonderful personality, Cindy. Ma'am, your zest and your energy in all that you do is truly remarkable, truly commendable. I don't have words for that. And I'm so fortunate that we have you in our department. Psychology department is proud to have you. Many thanks also to the IQAC team, our coordinator, Dr. Lokesh Gupta, and our deputy coordinator, Dr. Manisha Mathur, for all the support and help. Lokesh, Manisha, we know that we can always count on you. I'd also, how can I not mention the ever-present support of my own department colleagues from the Department of Psychology, your constant motivation, encouragement. I think that's what takes us far. All our dear students from the Department of Psychology, it's your enthusiasm that keeps us going. Thank you so much, Priyanka, Sangeeta, our technical support team for having provided and having ensured that it's a seamless conduct of the session. And last but not the least, my heartfelt thanks to all the participants of today's session who joined in from diverse locations across the country, whether online on the Zoom link or YouTube otherwise. You've been truly amazing. Thank you once again, all of you, for joining. And now I hand over to Manisha to bring the session to a close. Over to you, Manisha. Thank you. Thank you once again. Many, many thanks.
Thank you, Garima. And I want to thank Garima, also the co-convener of the
association. It's just that we are a wonderful team, and to many more such beautiful occasions together.
नहीं गरिमा, धन्यवाद को भी धन्यवाद की गरिमा बनी रहनी चाहिए. चलिए, थैंक यू. फीडबैक फॉर्म सेंड कर दिया गया है, प्लीज आप फिल कर दीजिए. एक मिनट.